From Greater Sandton and beyond, get ready for the Sandton Times Hour.
With your host,
Alexander.
Ladies and gentlemen, everyone in between and beyond, welcome to the Sandton Times Hour. It's edition 190. It's week 15 of 2025, and I'm Alexander Leipner. And it's a very special welcome to everyone listening for the very first time. If that's you, well, you are a very special guest joining us today, listening in on air or online. But of course, also our Sandton Times Hour nation in Johannesburg and Pretoria, across South Africa, and everywhere and anywhere else in the world. Wherever you are, I'm happy to report that all is well in Sandton land, even if it is a little bit chilly. It's been a little bit cold this past week, and I hope you've been dressing up warmly and maybe even preparing for winter, pulling out the blankets, the scarves, the beanies, all those good things. But I'd like to hear from you, as always, and if you would like to get in touch, you can send through your questions, comments, and feedback on a myriad of different channels. You can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect on social media @Sandton Times. You can hop onto the website sandtontimes.co.za or make use of the Sandton Times exclusive WhatsApp line. It's 084 Sandton. That's 084 726 3866, 084 726 3866. And you can send through voice notes, text messages, and whatever other media you've got. And I'll be happy to share that with our audience over the next couple of weeks. And if you're not part of that podcast community, be sure to subscribe to the Sandton Times Hour on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, AfriPods, Podcast Party, and so many more. And be sure to like and share the show wherever with whoever you would like to. Joining me on the team is my man behind the mixing desk, Vincenzo. I think you've missed me for the last couple of days. I'm back from the UK, and I must say it's probably a first time in history that I've come back from sunny days in London to rainy days in Johannesburg. It almost feels like the world has been flipped upside down. So I did bring you a little souvenir, Vincenzo. Let me just have a quick look here in my box here. Ah, there we go. I got you a Sherlock Holmes rubber duck. Doesn't make a noise. Okay, well, there's a rubber duck. And here, some Big Ben salt and pepper shakers. So I hope you find use for those items. And we'll be bringing you a dedicated show with some interviews, reviews, and impressions from London, Southampton, and of course the maiden voyage of that cruise ship that I went on, which was absolutely incredible. A £1 billion cruise ship with 20 decks and 17 restaurants, an aqua coaster, and so many more things for people to enjoy. It's part of the Prima Plus class of Norwegian Cruise Lines, and I think you're going to find that fascinating. So that's something to look forward to over the coming weeks. But what are we doing over the coming hour? What and who are we going to be chatting to? Well, in a bit, I'll be catching up with a renowned economist to make sense of the recent budget debacle that we've had in South Africa, as well as the US trade tariff adjustments that are causing waves. I even see there's a 10% tariff that has been placed on an uninhabited Antarctic island, which I think is just inhabited by emperor penguins. So I'm not quite sure who's going to be paying those tariffs on those pieces of ice, but we'll find out. Then I sit down with one of South Africa's most well-known political figures to discuss her entry into comedy, believe it or not. Stay listening for that. And then after that, our regular entertainment chat returns with a look at some recommended movies and those of a niche kind. So if you're into movies that are not mainstream, this could be an interesting chat for you. And finally, it's cocktails and mixology as South Africa competes on the global stage once more. All this and a little bit extra in the next hour.
Show some love.
subscribe, share,
Leave a review and rating for the Sandton Times Hour
on your favorite podcast app now.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
So Dawie Roodt is a renowned economist. He's a thought leader. He's the founder and director and chief economist of the Efficient Group and also one of South Africa's leading financial minds. And with a decade of experience in economic policy, financial markets, and fiscal analysis, Dawie is a trusted voice on South Africa's economic landscape. And I turn to him this week for a little bit of clarity, advice, and guidance on SA's budget and, of course, the US trade tariffs. Dawie, thanks for making the time to be on the Sandton Times Hour.
My pleasure.
Dawie, let's dive straight into it, kicking off with the South African budget, which has been, I think, for the first time in forever, way less straightforward than it was in previous years, and it's been back and forward. And this past week, we've seen some sort of movement. But from where you're sitting, Dawie, where are we with the budget? How does this affect us?
And this was my 40th budget that I'm analyzing. And you asked me where we are, and the answer is I don't know. I do not know if we've got a budget. I do not know if we've got a government, because I don't know. These things are all sort of up there in the air. Now, let me get to the budget first. So the budget has been, apparently, the framework of the budget has been approved, apparently. But if I listen to what the Action South Africa said, for example, they said they will approve it provided that there's another plan made with value-added tax. So they sort of conditionally approve it, or maybe not. And there could be some legal actions here. So maybe the budget is not actually approved. That's why I say I don't know. But it doesn't really matter, because the fight here is about roughly about 10 billion rand, and that is the increase in VAT. Of course, there are some other issues as well. But the increase in VAT with 50 basis points, that is basically the main fight here. And if you go back only 1 week, a week ago, SARS announced that they collected about 10 billion rand more in the previous financial year than what they thought they're going to collect. So that VAT increase, they've got the money in the bank already. You don't really need to increase the VAT. There's some other increases like personal income taxes as well, but nobody's even talking about that money that they already have. So this fight about the VAT increase is about one thing only, and it's a game of chicken between political parties. They want to see who's going to blink first. And the ANC, I must tell you, I think the ANC, this is a lose-lose for the ANC, because they succeeded. If they succeeded, we're not sure about that, but they succeeded in increasing VAT now by 50 basis points. And I promise you, the guys that were opposed to this, they're going to point a finger to the ANC and say, listen, this is the political party that increased your taxes, the taxes on the poor, and that's going to cost the ANC. On the other hand, if there was no increase in VAT, then the ANC would have had eggs on their face, because the DA would have won the fight, and again the ANC would have lost. So this is a lose-lose for the ANC. But okay, so we've got a budget. Maybe just by way of background, the fiscal accounts have become unsustainable. The debt levels are far too high. It's going to increase even further. The South African economy is not going to grow at the rate that the Minister of Finance is estimating it is going to grow. And on top of all of that, we've got the tariffs from Donald Trump. So we're looking at very weak economic growth this year and for years to come. As long as the ANC is in charge, and as long as the ANC keep on implementing their policies, the economy is not going to grow strongly. So the economy is not going to support the fiscal accounts, because there's just not strong enough economic growth. And now we have things like, for example, personal income tax increases, a VAT increase, and so on. And all of that is just going to exacerbate the very difficult situation in which we're in. So yes, I don't know if we've got a budget. I don't know if it's going to be kicked out. I don't know what the courts are going to say. But for now, I've never experienced this. Like I've said, this was my 40th budget. And it is a bit of a mess, I think.
And if that wasn't enough, we also had the Trump trade tariffs kick off this past week. And Dawie, your thoughts on this new trade tariff? I don't know if it's a proposal, if it's a definite that Trump put on the table, but certainly it can't be too exciting for those people doing business with the United States.
I think you're not going to talk to me again, because again, I'm going to start by saying I don't know. Like in the budget, the question about the budget. This is bad news for us. It's not only bad news for us, it's bad news for the world economy and for the US economy, just by the way. Maybe I can just give a bit of a background so we can understand where this comes from. Of course, there is a lot of ideology and nationalism and stuff like that in there as well. But we have to understand what's going on in the United States economy. The US economy, like the South African economy, is also facing some serious fiscal problems. Their debt levels are just too high. That is a major problem. And there are a couple of ways through which you can reduce debt. One is you spend less. And that's the job of Elon Musk, trying to find places where they can spend less. And another way is to get more money in. And that is by way of various taxes. And that is part of the reason, by the way, why Donald Trump is introducing all these various tariffs on many countries in the world, because he says he wants to achieve two things. He wants to get money in, a tax revenue in for the state, so he can borrow less. That's the first thing he wants to do. And secondly, he wants to protect the American economy. So the first issue, the fiscal issue, that would have been, somebody would have to address that issue. Donald Trump is perhaps not very elegant in addressing this issue, but it's something that would have been done, that somebody will have to do this. The President of the United States must make a stand and say, listen, we have to spend less money or we have to get more money in. So that would have happened perhaps by somebody else with a slightly better personality, but that is something that needs to happen. The second one is the tariffs. Now, the tariffs, we have to understand as well, is that the tariffs is seen as a source of revenue for the US, but the tariffs, tariffs are all over the place. Many countries in the world, including South Africa, by the way, have tariffs against imports of other countries. For example, if you import a motor vehicle in South Africa, you pay a huge tariff on that because we use that to protect our local motor industry. Exactly the same what Donald Trump is trying to do at the moment. And if you look at the various tariffs, you will find many countries in the world got higher tariffs against US imports than the tariffs that the United States have against those specific countries in terms of their imports to the United States. So many cases, I mean, there's people complaining about the US, but you are as guilty yourself as the US, in fact, even more, if you look at the levels of tariffs. So Donald Trump is trying to use his words to level the playing field, to make sure that the trade imbalances globally is rectified. And also he wants to get a bit of a revenue in. So, but the price that we're going to pay is going to be quite painful. In the case of South Africa, we are probably going to be kicked off AGOA, which will shave off 0.2, 0.3% of economic growth in South Africa. Now this additional tariffs will again take off a point whatever percent of economic growth. And it's probably going to lead to South Africa's economy not growing. I don't think we're going to see 1% growth this year. Initially, the Minister of Finance said we're going to see 2%, but it's probably going to be 1%. So in the short term, it's going to be very disruptive to everybody, and not only South Africa, for the rest of the world. But in the medium, longer term, there could be some good in it. The good could be in it that South Africa can go back to the United States and say, listen, we're sorry about all the tariffs against your stuff. We will get rid of it. You get rid of your tariffs if you don't mind, kind of thing. And maybe we could see a new kind of agreement between the US and many other countries in the world. And eventually that will lead to a more balanced trade internationally, which, like I've mentioned earlier, the trade globally is not that much balanced. And the US is running a huge deficit with the rest of the world. So yes, in the medium, longer term, maybe some good could come from this. But for now, get ready for it. This is going to be very, very painful.
There you have it, the views and voice of Dawie Roodt. He is the Economist thought leader and the founder, director, and chief economist of the Efficient Group, giving us a bit of insight into his thoughts around the current budget back and forward, and also, of course, the US tariffs that have been a hot topic this past week. Dawie, thank you so much for making the time and being on the Sandton Times Hour.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, it's time for a quick break. This is the Sandton Times Hour. We'll be right back after this.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
On Friday, the Laugh Africa Comedy Festival announced its candidate for the 2025 Roast of, which forms part of the lineup. And if you're not sure what a roast is, well, let me try and briefly explain a roast. A roast is a style of comedy where a guest of honor is playfully and sometimes quite brutally insulted with jokes mixed with genuine praise and in front of friends and fans and media and those who've bought tickets to watch it. Now, the event is led by a roast master, and both the guest and the audience members may be teased. And the idea is that the humor is taken in good spirit, not as serious criticism, but it is fairly spicy and it is quite rough, as mentioned. And there's no insult too big or too small if you've watched one of these roasts. Well, now that you have a better idea of what's in store, you can imagine the general surprise and amusement when this year's roastee was announced as Helen Zille. I caught up with her in Sandton post this announcement and asked her if this will be the roast of Helen Zille or the roasting by Helen Zille.
Well, it's definitely the latter. I mean, these guys don't know what they've let themselves in for, but I like to give other people surprises just as much as I like to give myself new experiences. So I hope it's a bit of both.
What did you think when they first approached you and said, listen, we'd like you to be part of something that is quite frivolous?
Yeah, well, I thought they were inviting me to lunch. I really did. You know, come for a roast, or, you know, do you do a roast? And I said, oh, yes, absolutely. Roast lamb is my preference. But then I realized they were talking about something else. And when I mentioned it to my sons, of course, I've never seen a roast. I've never even heard of a roast. I'm so square. And they said to me, Ma, you know what this is. And we would strongly advise you don't do that. But I was giving them a bit of their own medicine, because every time I advised them when they were young not to do it, they went ahead anyway. So I showed them that it can work both ways.
Being of German background myself, I know that the Germans are not particularly well known for their sense of humor. Is it something that you've developed over the years of living in South Africa, that South Africans are naturally quite funny and quite humorous people?
Well, for me it was a survival mechanism. And it's, you know, you've got to learn to laugh at yourself and laugh with other people. And slowly, as a German, you actually find that beneath the layers there is a funny bone, even if you can't touch it often.
Well, this could be some good marketing for brand Germany, I think, if nothing else. Helen, did you have to go get approvals from the party structures? Because you are still very active in politics.
Yes.
Did you have to go around and sort of check in with certain people to say, look, I'm doing this. Are we all in agreement this is a good idea?
Well, I went to John, my leader, and I said to him, are you okay with this? And he said to me he wasn't thrilled about it. He didn't say that. What he said implied that he wasn't thrilled about it, but he would leave it to me.
And are you hoping to draw on some of the more witty people in the party to provide you with a couple of lines that might be suitable?
Well, I haven't thought of that yet, but that's a good idea. Thanks for giving me tips.
Helen, anytime. Helen, what are you hoping to get out of this experience when you look back on doing this, something that is normally quite brutal of an evening?
Yeah. Look, I enjoy risks. I'm not risk averse in any way. And I'm sometimes too gung-ho to face a new risk. That's why I'm surrounded by people who hold me back and advise me not to do things, because I'm all gung-ho. I want to roll up my sleeves and go and land the blows. So I love new experiences. I love doing things that I would never do again in my life or never have done before. If I go to a restaurant, I look at the menu for the most outlandish thing that I can pick and choose from. So that's who I am. And the roast seemed to fit quite well into my personality.
Helen, if you could choose any particular people to be part of this roasting panel, do you have any sort of preferential names or faces that you'd like to see? Maybe a familiar face that will make it a bit easier to digest.
Well, I would say my husband, but he couldn't roast for love or money. You know, he's just too nice. So he can't be anywhere near there. I would... You see, it's good that I don't know who's going to be on the panel, so it's very difficult for me to say. I can't even envisage what this roast is going to look like. But I'm sure a few of my political opponents will be there, which will be nice and interesting.
You've been in politics for such a long time. You had a very long career, Helen. How long do you still see yourself doing this for? And how many other bucket list items do you still have that you'd like to still add to your portfolio of incredible experiences?
Well, I've never been to the Drakensberg, so I'm going there on the Easter weekend. That's a big one for me. That's a big bucket list item for me. And I'm taking my husband as a birthday present. And then we're going to cruise on the Norwegian fjords. That is another big bucket list item for me. And so I've got a lot of travel bucket list items which are going to be fun. But every time I see a potential experience that is going to blow me out of the water, I go for it.
And career-wise, how long do you think you'll still be in politics for?
My career is behind me. My career in politics is definitely behind me. What I do want to do, though, is help the DA succeed. You know, South Africa won't work without the DA succeeding. And I love South Africa, and I want South Africa to work. And I am absolutely committed to my grandchildren staying here. And that's what I do it for. You know, I have not for my career. I've got no career. My career is behind me.
The main star of the Roast of Helen Zille herself, and it will be going down in Sandton in May, and all the details will be up on the website, sandtontimes.co.za, should you wish to attend. And if you do miss it and don't get a chance to attend, well, I'm sure it'll be up on Showmax in the coming weeks after that. And of course, the full press Q&A with Helen Zille in Sandton with comedian Tumi Murake will be up on the Sandton Times YouTube channel as well. So why not go and have a look at that?
Follow the Sandton Times on social media.
At Sandton Times.
Taking you to the second half of the Sandton Times Hour, my name is Alexander Leipner, and if there's anything that sounded interesting, compelling, something that you want to find out a little bit more about on the show, well, if you didn't get a chance to write it all down, don't worry, you can go onto the website and check out the show notes for this week's show, and you can hop onto sandtontimes.co.za. All the details and breakdowns and links and further reading will be up on there, and of course, you can also take advantage of following the Sandton Times on social media at Sandton Times, and check out the WhatsApp line 084 Sandton, that's 084 726 3866. That's the exclusive Sandton Times WhatsApp line, and you can send through your voice notes, text messages, and so much more. And you can save that to your phone and use it exclusively. As we do every single week around about this time, we connect with our entertainment commentator for the Sandton Times, Tat Wolfen. And Tat, it's good to have you on the show again.
It's so good to be back on the show, Alex.
Tat, we've got a lot to get through this week. There's been a lot of entertainment as always. You've got a cool new movie that's coming out, A Kind of Madness.
Yeah, I certainly do. A South African movie, and I think actually the very first South African movie to open with an MGM logo. As a fan of classic Hollywood and stuff, I love to see the MGM logo, although sadly MGM is not what it used to be. You know, in days of classic Hollywood, they always used to boast that they had more stars than there are in the sky, because back then as well, studios used to have stars who were contracted to them. Now MGM belongs to Amazon, and Amazon probably belongs to BlackRock. And as we know, everything in the world is probably owned by two companies. But be that as it may, A Kind of Madness stars two South African acting veterans. That is Sandra Prinsloo and Ian Roberts. So it's about a woman who has been taken to a home for people suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's. She's been taken there by her adult children, and her husband had very resentfully and finally agreed to the arrangement. But she's very, very unhappy in this home, even though it looks like quite a decent enterprise, but she's not happy there. It's not her home, and she's always conscious of this, and she's very angry about it. So her husband decides that he's going to break her out of there. And the movie begins with this breakout. The kids are not happy about it, but he decides that it's the only solution for her. And the movie leads you to that question: how do you care for people who are in that same situation? Is it right to just, you know, on the one hand, you're saying that you're just bunging her in this impersonal place. On the other hand, you're saying that she, the argument is that she is not cerebrally and mentally capable of handling the world out there. The movie really brings that subject into very clear focus. And I think it's a very important movie to watch. I think it's a very well-handled movie. I had a couple of small issues with it, but you know what? I deal with all of that on the sandtontimes.co.za website, where I'm going to go into in-depth analysis.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, it's on the website. Then there's a Disney Plus movie that's come out. I know there was a showcase and a breakfast that I was clearly totally underqualified for, but you've called it the best movie of the year. That is quite a statement this early in the year.
Yes, and you know, I'd even declared that in January when the film released. It's a 2024 movie, or was released last year in US markets towards the end of last year, but it did open here in January. And when I saw this movie, I said, this is going to be one of the movies of the year. It's written by, directed by, and co-starring Jesse Eisenberg. And he plays along Kieran Culkin, and they play these two New York lads who decide to go to Poland on what you might call a kind of a heritage trip, okay? And on the surface, it's about these two cousins who go to Eastern Europe to find out more about their grandmother's history and the Holocaust, etc. And that certainly is one level of the movie. But the movie is also a brilliant character study of these two young men who clearly love one another. They've grown up as very close cousins and they have this incredible bond. But during the trip, certain layers come to reveal themselves. And the movie is also about depression, which you come to discover as the movie unfurls. It's a really brilliant human character study. And I'm also going to be going a bit more into that on the sandtontimes.co.za website. The movie is a real pain. As the movie unfolds, you will discover that the title has a double meaning, really.
So a kind of madness, a real pain. So those are two movie recommendations for this week. But you've also spent a bit of time looking at the niche market for movies, or the niche movie market.
Yeah, and this is why I'm really impressed with NuMetro theaters, because they've really gone into serving niche markets. Like other movie theaters, they are showing opera and they're showing ballet, which are two very powerful niches, actually, because they have a dedicated market, not a big one, but there's a dedicated market for that. And in fact, often at NuMetro, you can watch a ballet or an opera live as it's happening in London. So people are sitting in theatre seats in London, paying the equivalent of, who knows, 5,000 rands or something, and you watching it here live in a movie theatre without someone's big hat or big head getting in your way. So that's really, I think that's amazing. I also wanted to go into two more of NuMetro's niche products, and in a masterful stroke of radio expertise, I will bring them both together in one event. Are you impressed?
I'm ready.
Impressed yet, Alex?
Tat, speechless.
I'm glad to hear that. So firstly is the fact that NuMetro is bringing us movies from the Far East, which broadens our viewing choice and exposes us to things other than the monolithic culture of California's well-heeled movie-making club. So over the last few years, they've shown us movies such as A Light Never Goes Out, which is from China. And it's an homage to the dying art of neon light, but it's also the story of a family. Beautiful movie, and I hope that it comes out one day in local streaming. And then they also showed us a movie called Past Lives from Korea. And I took a mate of mine to see the movie. He obviously related to it because of something that had happened in his life. And I kid you not, he was actually bawling like a baby. Fortunately, I always carry tissues and stuff on me, and I had to hand him a couple of tissues because he was completely devastated by the movie Past Lives. So it's a really interesting and useful thing, I think, to know that they are bringing out movies from the Far East, okay, which is like, you can open your eyes to whole different cultures. But another niche thing about NuMetro is their 4DX theaters. And it's a movie theater system from Korea. If you sit in a 4DX theater, your seats move in accordance with the action on the screen. And they also add effects such as wind and smell and the whole thing. So you really get tossed around and you have your senses completely assaulted. And, you know, some people say that it's a gimmick. So, yeah, and if it isn't going out supposed to be fun? So what if it's a gimmick? So now I want to do this thing where I bring those two streams together and tell you that I saw a Korean concert in 4DX, and it was the boy band called 17. Now, if you don't know what K-pop is Korean pop, right? In a K-pop group, there are normally about 12 or so members. They take these good-looking boys and they make them up so that they're even prettier than China dolls, and they dance to precision, like within a split second of a millisecond. And that's what they do. They dance and perform, and these, I would imagine their audience is mainly young girls. It's not my scene, but I had to go and see this concert that they had on at their 4DX theater because, you know, I know that K-pop is a huge cultural phenomenon around the world, and I don't think I'll be watching any more K-pop concerts again. It was quite incredible. They had this super wide stage, and it was occupied by computer graphics and video and pyrotechnics and the whole thing. So the audience loved it. But if you are into K-pop, you know that's where you go.
So there you have it, a kind of madness on the circuit and at the moment, and a real pain, which is on Disney Plus. And then you heard it there from Tat. If you're into sort of more Asian movies, something that's a bit different, considered to be a bit more niche, well, go check that out at NuMetro, and also that 4DX experience. If you like to be shaken and stirred whilst watching your movie, that's something to watch. Tat Wolfen, commentator on entertainment for the Sandton Times. It's been great to catch up with you again.
Catch you next week.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
So Angostura bitters are a concentrated bitters. It's a herbal alcoholic preparation, which is produced by the House of Angostura in Trinidad and Tobago. And it's typically used for flavoring beverages. Some people might enjoy a rock shandy, or the other one, Steelworks, if you've played a couple of rounds of golfs. Well, bitters were first produced in the town of Angostura in Venezuela. And I guess that's where they got the name from. And it's very recognizable by its very distinctive oversized label on a bottle that has a yellow cap. Now, that label has a very interesting story, just to lead into my next interview. So after the founder, Dr. Johann Ziegertz, passed in 1870, his sons Carlos, Luis, and Alfredo, they rebranded this Angostura Bitters bottle for a competition. The one designed the bottle and the other one designed the label, but neither of them checked with each other what size the label or what size the bottle was going to be. Needless to say, an oversized label ended up on a slightly smaller bottle by mistake. They entered the competition anyway. They lost, they didn't win, but a judge advised them to keep it, and that's what's made Angostura Bitters stand out on a shelf when you see it. It has that oversized bottle, but as I say, if you are someone who enjoys cocktails or things like a rock shandy, well, it's something that is a household staple in your cupboard. Now, South Africa has a new cocktail champion, which leads me to our interview. He was crowned the Angostura Global Cocktail Challenge winner for the South African finals. His name's Alexander Fahrenheim, and he secured a place for the world stage in Trinidad and Tobago this coming May. He kicked off his career at Sin and Tax in Johannesburg, and he's been leading the country's mixology scenes. Alexander has also done a couple of cocktails for me over the last couple of months. I've bumped into him at many events, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic, and I can tell you his mixtures and concoctions are truly spectacular, and I'm thrilled to have him join me on the line. And Alexander, it's good to have you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Alex, thank you so much for having me, and what a flattering introduction.
Well, listen, Alexander, it's quite an elaborate one. I mean, giving you a bit of history, and then also, of course, how this all fits together with you and Angostura Bitters. But let's get into this competition that you've won. You're now into the global finals. How would you describe your 8-year plus mixology journey?
I would say it's one that's had its many ups and downs. I don't think when I started bartending 8 years ago that I ever thought we would be sitting here where we are now 8 years down the line. I had no idea the world of cocktails was this big and could take me this global. It's a really wonderful thing for our industry to start getting that kind of exposure and passing it down to the young guys.
Just help me with my observation here, Alex, because I feel that the world of cocktail making and bartending has seen a bit of a renaissance, but also a certain professionalism. I mean, I suppose back in the 60s and 70s, there was a certain bouginess around it. People wore suits. They would pour these things in elaborate ways. Then, we kind of went through a stage where, a bartender was considered somebody who would crack open a beer for you, throw it across the bar and take your money and listen to your worries. And it's sort of come back to that art meets science kind of space where you're not just going to have a drink, but you're going to have an experience, you're going to have a bit of theater, you're going to have something that you can't have anywhere else.
100%. I mean, if we look even further back in the 60s, we've got pre-prohibition America, which is where you see bartending as a real trade profession. You learn from your seniors, much like apprentices do in any other kind of trade profession. It was a respected trade profession. You kind of get this history of that falling off, that picking back up and falling off again. And from about the early 2000s, we see that renaissance kind of start to kick back through in America. And I guess my timing in this whole cocktail renaissance is a lucky one, because it's kind of happening and happened when I joined the scene here in South Africa. I mean, we do catch on to trends a little bit later, And so hours started to pick up closer to 2012, 2013. And I guess I just found myself right time, right space.
I mean, competing on a national stage is one thing, and you've obviously come out tops in terms of South Africa. Taking that same energy now into a global stage, what are your fears, trepidations, excitements around representing South Africa now in Trinidad and Tobago?
There's always a kind of gut feeling fear whenever you stand on a stage. I think I've been lucky enough over the last 8 years to stand on many stages here in South Africa and once or twice overseas, that it's one of those things that is just a little bit nerve-wracking. I mean, quite like preparing for this interview. Anytime you public speak as a non-public speaker, it's that little knot in the stomach. But I think that's the greatest fear. Being able to take what we do here in South Africa and go and share a bit of a South African story with bartenders and with brands overseas, that is unbelievably exciting, and I feel really privileged to be able to go and do that. That's the big headline of all of this: is how can I get over there and represent our country to its absolute best?
Alex, you do a lot of consulting as well. You obviously have carved yourself out as somebody who's really somebody to watch in terms of the cocktail space. What kind of advice do you have to aspiring bartenders, young mixologists trying to get into the industry? Where should they be watching out, and how could they fast track their career based on some of the the experiences that you've had?
I don't think there's any necessary way we're gonna fast track anything, but it comes back down to even though we're more technologically advanced than we've kind of ever been, we are still, as a bartender, a trade profession. Reach out to the people who are doing the things you want to be doing, whether that be you want to be competing and you want to try and make it to a global stage. Speak to people like myself. Speak to people, like Julian Short, like Dawie Roodt, who won World Class last year. Reach out to those guys and talk to people, because that's how we're going to learn. Don't be afraid to fall flat on your face. We've all got to mess up. We've all got to stumble at some stage, but it's how you pick yourself back up and go out there. Getting into a competition environment, you learn so much from the bartenders you're bartending around in a competition environment, but putting that first step into going to do it is the most nerve-wracking thing you're ever going to do, because what if I don't? A good friend of mine said to me years and years ago when I started competing, the worst case scenario entering a competition is you're going to find yourself winning, and then you've got to go and do it all over again somewhere else in the world.
Very
so
true.
Don't be afraid to take that first step.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. And I suppose in the context of this interview, it's not don't try and reinvent the wheel, but maybe don't try and reinvent the whiskey sours. Although maybe you might want to reinvent the whiskey sours if you want to try and compete on a global stage. Alex, before I let you go, it'd be amiss for me not to ask you about some trends happening in your space. When it comes to the local cocktail industry growing, but also in terms of some of the stuff that excites you at the moment as a mixologist?
One of my favorite trends at the moment is we're definitely moving into a lower ABV or a no ABV space. And as a cocktail bartender, I know that kind of sounds weird as something that excites me. I have a side of my business where we produce mocktails, and a low ABV drink is something delightful. We can drink it for longer. We can experience more of it. Whereas I'm a little bit gluttonous for that. The other one that I think I'm enjoying, and I think we're only just dipping the toe into here in South Africa, is more of a savory cocktail movement. If you look at South Africa at the moment, something like a spicy margarita is very, very popular. And it's only a matter of time before what can we do more than just a spicy margarita in a savory cocktail. And I think that's a very exciting space to be headed towards, because trying to do savory cocktails kind of 6 years ago, you either completely hit it with 3 regulars and missed it with the rest of the bar, or you missed it all over the show.
Well, there's certainly something to go check out, and Alexander Fahrenheim is on his way to compete in the ANGOSTURA Global Cocktail Challenge on behalf of South Africa. And Alex, we wish you all the best for that competition, but also thank you for making the time to hop onto the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you very much for having me, Alex. It's always a pleasure.
All right, let's get the bill and round it all up for another week of the Sandton Times Hour. And of course, it's always available on a podcast. If you want to listen to another interview, share it. You can check it out on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Podcast Party, and many other leading digital audio platforms. If you want to get in touch, email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. Connect on social media @Sandton Times, and hop onto the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. Or try the WhatsApp line. Save it to your phone. It's the exclusive Sandton Times WhatsApp number, 084 Sandton. That's 084 726 3866. And feel free to send through your voice notes, text messages, media, and whatever else you might have. Feel free to send through your questions and comments during the week, or whenever you you get a chance to do so. And a special thank you to all my guests who made time to be on the show this week, as well as the team behind the scenes who pull it all together every single week. It's hugely appreciated. Of course, thank you to you for listening, and let's do it all again next week.
That's it for this week. Thanks for listening to the Sandton Times Hour. And if you enjoyed it, be sure to share it.